regardless of what the literature might tell you, they are not Geophagus dicteri. So do not expect a Geophagus dicteri to be this size or look like this. Okay, it's a gorgeous fish. It just gets quite large and it has different patterns a little bit. The coloration is quite similar, but doesn't have the red head and all that good stuff. So these guys are quite different and quite unique, and they are quite sought after. They're quite expensive. I'm selling this group for $250, and the person that's buying them didn't even bargain. When I told him the price, he was completely happy with them because he knows exactly how much these are worth. My friend just bought really small ones for $22 or something like that. So they were about 1.5 inches for $22. I bought the small ones for these guys for $22 each when they were about that big, and I grew these from fry that were about 1.5 inches. So I'm quite pleased with myself. I wish I had a bigger tank to keep them, but I don't. And since that, I am getting them, giving them to somebody that can really take care of them and provide them with a larger aquarium and then get spawns. What is going on, world? Welcome back to Malik's Water Garden. Today is going to be a very special video where we're going to be looking at a different species than what we're usually used to looking at, which is our Geophagus redhead Tapajos. These guys are a cichlid, they're not a pleco, so this is a little bit different than usual. But I figured this video has to be made because these fish are actually sold right now. They are going to this lovely gentleman named William. He's coming to pick them up tomorrow. So this video is actually for him as well as for you guys, so you can actually take care of these guys properly. So these fish are actually a type of Geophagus that are collected from South America. This particular type comes from Rio Tapajo, which is in the lower Amazon and the lower Singu area. Initially, they were thought to be the Geophagus steinecteri, but they are now believed to be a complete separate form of their own, and they are only found in a particular river. There's another similar species that's found in the similar river, which is beside it, and it's a Geophagus orange head. So these are actually the redhead versions, and the orange head is a little bit different. There are some morphological differences, so I recommend keeping them in their own tank separately from other types of Geophagus. They can easily hybridize with other Geophagus, and you will lose the genes of these fish, so you do not want to keep them with other types of similar looking fish. Having said that, these guys are quite easy to take care of. I have a group of 5 here, and I have 2 males and 3 females. I originally purchased 6, and they did really well together, and there was no issues in terms of aggression. They are not peaceful, but in a group setting they do get along. So there is aggression between each other, but because there's a group, they do kind of subside the aggression between each other. The minimum number recommended to keep in a group is 5. Anything less than 5, I've noticed, will result in the weaker fish getting picked on. So because I had 6 of these originally, so I had 3 pairs. And when they did become sexually mature, I tried separating them into pairs and moving them into their own tanks and try to get more spawns that way. But as soon as I separated the males and females, or the pairs, the male would end up picking up on the females too much, and the females became super weak and almost died. And in 2 of the cases out of the 3 where I had to put them all together, I was actually quite worried to move them all together into the same tank, thinking that they would not get along. But they definitely got together in the same group, and they figured out their hierarchy within a day, and they have been together since then. So all 5 of them that are in this tank are doing great. I did lose one in the process. It did develop a bacterial infection on its gills and fins, and I think it was due to stress, and it didn't recover from that. So I am now left with these 5. Somebody is coming to pick them up tomorrow or Sunday. The purpose of this video is to get him as well as you guys used to the idea of taking care of these fish, and also just give you a basic understanding of them. And so we're going to be looking at them in basic detail and see what they're all about. Now these guys don't grow that big. This particular variety, the Geophagus Tapajo redheads, only go to about 6 inches. Now my large male here, he's about 6 inches with all the trailers and stuff. But if you were to just measure the fish without the tail, it's about 5 inch. So they don't grow too big, which is a great thing for smaller tanks. When I say small, they still need at least a 55 gallon or larger. This tank here is a 35 gallon, and these 5 are little bit overcrowded in this tank, which is why I am actually rehoming them to a person that owns a larger tank that can give them a bigger space. So in terms of groups, you need at least a 4 foot by 2 foot by 2 foot tank. So it's 180 centimeters or 120 centimeters by 60 centimeters by 60 centimeters, the smallest for a group of 5 or 6 adults. Now a larger tank is obviously better, and they do much better in larger groups, so I recommend a group of at least 6 to 8. if not more. And they do seem to do really well in a group, and they do seem to pick out their own pairs and even spawn in a large enough tank. I would say 180 centimeter tank, which is a 6-foot tank. You could probably have a group of 8 of them, and they would pick their own pairs and spawn in the tank without any issues. In this tank, which is a 35 gallon, so it's a 90 centimeter tank, which is half the size these guys require, it is difficult for these 5 fish to establish territories and spawn. But I have gotten a couple of spawns out of these still, and some of these females have held eggs before, and when they do release, the rest of the fish in here just go to town on the fry. So I just haven't been on top of it to actually collect fry, but if I were to, I could actually get spawns out of these guys because they are already spawning. So having said that, they are easy fish to keep and spawn, and they spawn quite readily in aquaria as long as there are mated pairs, and also there is enough space for them to spawn, and the water parameters are correct. Now the water parameters for these guys are a little bit on the acidic side. They do come from black water, except for the orange head form comes from a white water river with slightly acidic water. Now all this information is on seriouslyfish.com, and highly recommend you check that stuff out and figure out more information as well and do some more reading on them. As far as I understand, they do require slightly acidic water. These guys are in a pH of 7.4, and they seem to do fine, but when the fry raising and the egg hatching might require slightly acidic to neutral water. I wouldn't say acidic, but neutral. 7.0 pH would be more ideal to actually get spawns. For the TDS, they require anything from 18 parts per million to 179 parts per million. That's the natural TDS range in the river that they come from. My water here is 163 parts per million and it's 7.4 pH. And I think it works for these guys properly because they seem to do well in my water here. Now, having said that, for temperature, they require temperature of between 26 degrees Celsius to 29 degrees Celsius. I would try to keep them in between on the cooler side and not too much on the cooler side. So 82 degrees Fahrenheit seems to be a good place to be, which is 28 degrees Celsius. I wouldn't go too high up above 82 degrees Fahrenheit or 28 degrees Celsius, and I wouldn't let it drop below 26 degrees Celsius or 78 degrees Fahrenheit, which is where these guys would be running into trouble. Now, having said that, short-term slight drops of temperature, or if the temperature drops to 75 degrees, the fish are not going to die. This tank has gone to 76 degrees over the winter, and there was a few days when it was really cold, and my entire fish room, the temperature dropped for a few degrees then below than normal, and these guys were completely fine. They were active, they were eating, they were doing well. But having said that, long term, you would want to keep them at above 78 degrees Fahrenheit or 26 degrees Celsius. Now, speaking of diet, they do require sand in their tank. This is something that a lot of literature seems to also include, but I figured that it's very important to mention this, so I'm going to say it again. They need sand in their tank. These animals are considered earth eaters. Geophagus essentially means earth eater, and they essentially take up gulps of sand into their mouth and they sift through the sand. So they're sand sifting species, and they sift through the sand for microorganisms, crustaceans, small insect larvae, and whatnot. And the sand seems to help with their digestion as well, and they do ingest quite a bit of it while they're sifting through it. So having sand is ideal for them and also helpful for their long-term survival. I would assume that these animals would not do well in a tank, a bare bottom tank with no substrate, and they would not live a long healthy life if they're not given proper sand to help with their digestion and whatnot. Also, on top of that, they are a micro predator to an extent. They do eat quite a bit of insect larvae and insects and whatnot, but in nature they also seem to be eating quite a bit of vegetable matter and detritus and stuff. The tests that they have done in wild specimens and in their gut, they have found quite a bit of different types of terrestrial as well as aquatic insects and insect larvae, and vegetables matter as well as seeds, detritus, and broken down leaf litter and whatnot. So essentially a balanced diet, and they definitely require quite a bit of protein, and they are a grazer. So with these guys, for example, I feed this tank at least 3 times a day, and usually when I'm feeding my fry in the other tanks, I will throw a little bit of food. They do better with small amounts of food frequently. So like they do really well if you were to feed the tank 4 to 5 times in smaller amounts. So what the fish would eat within 30 seconds to a minute, and do that 5 times, your fish would do better. Now, it's not practical for a lot of us, so I would say 3 times a day at least feed smaller amounts until the fish are sexually mature and full size, and then you can reduce the feeding to 2 times a day. But it's still better to feed them 3 times in smaller amounts than 2 times in a larger quantity. So that's essentially the feeding aspect of things. Water parameters are pretty much essentially the same as most of your other South American fish. They do like a little bit acidic. You do want to keep it the TDS below 180 parts per million. I wouldn't keep them in hard water just because they do require softer water, and for some reason I've noticed that animals that are kept in hard water don't show as nice a color. So these guys, you can see they're showing a lot of nice coloration. This tank, actually the pH in here drops quite a bit over the week because I do have oak leaves and wood and whatever. So the pH could go down anywhere from 7 to 6.8, below that, or somewhere around there. So throughout the week. So now, having said that, they do really well enjoy the lower pH, and they do spawn better, and the egg hatch rate seems to be better in a lower pH environment. But I have garden spawns in this tank as well as in the other tanks where the pH is 7.4 and the TD is 180 parts per million, and there's about 20 parts per million in nitrates. So they are not too picky in that sense either. Now, aside from that, there's not much more I can add to it. They do well in groups. You cannot keep them in pairs. You please keep them in at least a group of 5. It is recommended 5 or more. During the spawning season, they do like to stay in pairs and they do their own thing in a corner or whatever, but the main group will still stay as a group, and the non-spawning or non-sexually mature or non-sexually active individuals will stay in a group and they enjoy each other's company. As far as other fish go, they can tolerate plecos. There's a lot of different plecos in here, L134s, L333s. I've had them with zebra plecos. They do well with zebra plecos. They do great with discus. They are great for a discus tank. There's an Ultim Angel in here, and they do well with the Ultim Angel. So I've also had them with a breeding pair of angels. They're not aggressive towards other fish. So just be careful. But overall, my experience was really good with the other fish. I've even had a goldfish in these guys. And the goldfish was actually my personal pet duckweed. And he was growing out in the tank these guys were growing out with together. And they've been together for about 6 months until I noticed the bigger male. When he became sexually mature, he was showing a little bit of aggression towards the goldfish. Not because it was a goldfish, but just because it was another fish that he was used to growing up with. And I think that it was just being dominant towards the goldfish, but I had to remove it just for that purpose. But duckweed actually can go in this tank and hold its own. I've had duckweed in here to remove duckweed a few times with these guys. And short term, they seem to be okay with my particular goldfish just because they know each other and they've been in the same tank together. But I don't recommend keeping them with goldfish or anything like that. But they can be kept with other South American cichlids like discus and angelfish and whatnot. They can also do good with plecos. A lot of different plecos would be fine with them, and even the dietary requirements seem to be okay with the hypancestris and these guys because I have them with a group of hypancestris, and they all eat the same food and they do great. Aside from that, they also enjoy company of like corridors and stuff. I've seen them school with corridors, especially when they were younger. They did really well with corridors. They were schooling with my CW027s, which are in this tank, so right there. They actually like each other quite a bit and they get along. And you can find out there's other different species that they will do good with. And just do your research on that. And they are okay also with red lizard catfish. I have a breeding pair in here of Rhinodoricaria species, so they do well with those. The things I would say you can't keep with them are smaller fish. Anything that potentially could become food, I would avoid. So small tetras, I would avoid. Small shrimp, definitely a no. They definitely go after shrimp, so that's in nature as well. I believe that's one of their foods. So shrimp are definitely a no. Small tetras get chased around a little bit. And whale-tailed angels, they seem to nip at their fins if they suck. This guy is particularly, I think it's more of a dominance thing just because he tries to push other fish around a little bit. But in general, like my angel here has really long trailers and whatnot, and they seem to leave him alone. So it's all hit or miss when it comes to a certain fish. A wild fish, I believe, would do better with these guys as opposed to tank bred varieties, especially the long fin tank bred angels and stuff. I would keep those away from these just as a precautionary measure, just to make sure that the fish don't get attacked or anything like that. But short fin angels, fine. Wild ultims, fine. Discus, fine. The discus and the angels actually are more dominant than them. So in this tank, for example, my ultim angel is the tank boss. Before that, I had the 2 discus in here, the blue ones, and they were the tag boss. So that's essentially what I can add to this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you guys enjoy your Geophagus and learn something about them, and do your research and get the right type of species, because some of these guys can get about a foot. The original Geophagus steinecteri can get about 12 inches, and this is not them. These guys are a smaller species, so we do definitely know that they are different species than the Geophagus steinecteri. Regardless of what the literature might tell you, they are not Geophagus steinecteri, so do not expect a Geophagus steinecteri to be this size or look like this. Okay, it's a gorgeous fish. It just gets quite large and it has different patterns a little bit. The coloration is quite similar, but doesn't have the red head and all that good stuff. So these guys are quite different and quite unique, and they are quite sought after. They're quite expensive. My friend just bought really small ones for $22 or something like that. So they were about 1.5 inches for $22. I bought the small ones for these guys for $22 each when they were about that big, and I grew these from fry that were about 1.5 inches. So I'm quite pleased with myself. I wish I had a bigger tank to keep them, but I don't. And since that, I am getting them, giving them to somebody that can really take care of them and provide them with a larger aquarium and then get spawns. So hope you get spawns out of these really soon, William. And as always, thank you so much for watching the video. I love you all. I'll see you on the next video. God bless you.